Hey, it's Adam. Here we are with another MixEffect tutorial. Today we're going to talk about how to connect MixEffect with your ATEM switcher. Now I know there's some people who are having problems getting their MixEffect application talking to their ATEM, so this is the video for you. Let's get started. So I'm going to bring in my iPad, and right now the iPad running MixEffect is not connected to any switcher. We want to connect it to two switchers today. First, we're going to connect it to the ATEM Mini, which is right here. Then we'll connect it to the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. So how do we do this? The first thing we need to do is find the IP address of your ATEM device. And that's what we're going to do right now by going to my Mac over here. And we see the ATEM setup application here. And right now the ATEM Mini is plugged in to my Mac via USB and to the network using an Ethernet cable. So I'm going to bring up my iPad and my own camera video here. And we see here, we're going to click on this icon here in the ATEM setup, and you see a bunch of network settings. Now, some switchers have the ability to grab a network address from the router, and some do not. In the case of the ATEM Mini, it does not have the ability to grab an IP address from the router, which means you need to enter it yourself. I'm going to click cancel here, and we're going to take a look at the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. We see here, it has a couple of options: IP setting, DHCP, or static IP. Static IP means I enter all these values here to set up the network settings for the device. And DHCP means I will get an address from the router. Okay. So a common problem that I see with people who can't get their devices connected is that the ATEM either has a self-assigned IP address, or the IP address that has been entered is invalid. So when you try to enter that in MixEffect over here, nothing happens because the addresses aren't matching up. Another common problem is that the devices, the switcher is on a network and has a valid IP address, but the iOS device or iPad is on a different network. So you could be on cellular and not on Wi-Fi, and you're like, why can't I connect to my ATEM? I see it right there. I enter the numbers and everything. That's because your iOS device is on cellular network and not on the same network as the hardwired network that the ATEM is connected to. So if we take a look here, stepping back, take a look at the ATEM Mini Extreme, we see I've assigned a static IP address of 10.0.1.52, okay? And we see that the gateway or the router is 10.0.1.1. Now, if we go to the Ethernet control panel on my iPad, and this is because my iPad Pro is connected to the network using an USB hub with an Ethernet jack, we see that the IP address is 10.0.1.41, and the subnet mask is the same as the subnet mask that's listed on the ATEM Mini Extreme, and the router or gateway is also the same. So this leads me to believe that the two devices are on the same network. So now, if I try to connect to it, if I go to the ATEM Mini Extreme and if I tap connect, I'm connected to the ATEM. And so now I can go to the switcher, I can tap something like, let's say, auto, and it'll do an auto transition to my camera and auto transition back to the super source. So this is exactly what we want. So now let's take a look at the ATEM Mini. So we're going to disconnect from this one here, and we're going to take a look at the ATEM Mini in ATEM setup. So earlier I had set the IP address to 63. That's actually what it was. So I'm actually going to go back to 63 because this is what it was set at before I started this video. And I was like, why can't I connect to the ATEM Mini? So we have here, over here, we have ATEM Mini I'm going to set it to, I'm going to create a new ATEM Mini. Create the address of 10.0.1.63. Say add. Okay. So now we see in my Mac, the IP address is set to this. It's saved. I can save it again. So you can see. And on the iPad, it's also set to 10.0.163. So let's see what happens. Oh, it's connected. Why did it connect? So I entered the IP address of 10.0.163. There could have been another device on the network that was also using that address. So there's a conflict now that the ATEM was trying to get that address, and then another device was getting that address. So earlier, before I started this video, that was exactly what happened. So what I had done is I changed the IP address to 90. So let's change that to 90. We'll say save. I have to put a period there. We'll say save. And now it's responding to 90. And you see on the iPad, it disconnected. So now if I try to connect it to 10.0.163, nothing's going to happen. It's going to try to connect, and it's going to fail because it can't connect to something that doesn't exist. But I have another ATEM mini switcher here in MixEffect whose address is 10.0.1.90. So let's see what happens. Tap connect, and it connects to the ATEM. Great. So it's important to note, again, your devices need to be on the same network. If your iPad or iPhone is on a wireless network and your ATEM is on the wired network, you need to make sure that the two can talk to each other. And the way you do that, again, is to take a look at the IP address of your devices. So in this case, on Wi-Fi, I'm at 10.0.1.64, and I have a router or gateway of 10.0.1.1, which is the same as the ATEM setup here for the ATEM Mini. This leads me to believe that I should be able to connect if I'm on Wi-Fi. We can take a look at on the iPhone here. So let's bring up the iPhone right now, bringing this guy in. So I need to do a little cropping of box 3 so you can see the iPhone. This is happening live using my SuperSource, which only exists on the ATEM Mini Extreme, ATEM Mini ISO, ATEM 2ME Production Studio, ATEM 4ME Broadcast Studio, and the ATEM Constellation. So we're going to make the iPad disappear. Make that one disappear. So now we're going to take a look at, I'm going to try to connect to the ATEM Mini. So we have, remember, this iOS device is on Wi-Fi. So I'm going to try connecting to this and see what happens. Oh, it's not working because it's at .90, remember. So I'm going to look for .90. So I'm going to just go bring that back. And there it got synced over. .90. I'm going to tap this and hopefully it should connect. Give it a second. Seems to be having problems. Oh, there it is. It got connected. So you see how now iPhone is on Wi-Fi and it was able to connect because they're on the same network. Okay. Now, if you think you're on the same network, but your iOS settings are showing that you're not on the same network, what is happening? It's possible that your iOS devices are on a Wi-Fi guest network. So I'm going to go switch back to my ATEM Mini Extreme here, and I'm going to bring in the SuperSource, come back to this one here. Okay, it's possible that your iOS and iPad devices are on a guest Wi-Fi network, and you can see that out by taking a look at the IP address and the gateway. Guest networks typically separate Wi-Fi traffic from Ethernet hardline traffic so that your Wi-Fi devices can't access things on the local network that are plugged in using the Ethernet. So what you need to do is you need to check to see if your devices on Wi-Fi are on this guest network. And if they are, get them off the guest network and get them onto the real wireless network that's more secure. And so you can check your router information, your router manual to see if your router has that ability to do that. Then the other thing to do to check is to make sure that your ATEM is not plugged into your computer. So I've seen cases where people are plugged into Ethernet into their computer directly, okay? And they're wondering, well, my Mac is on the network and my iPad's on the network, but I can't access the ATEM. And that's because your Mac has created a separate network just for the ATEM, okay? So you need to go look in ATEM setup over here and see what the IP address. It might be something completely different, like 192.168.100.10. And that's like, that's not the same thing as my my iPad, which is at 10.0.1.64. What's happening here? And again, that's because the Mac or your PC has created its own network and it's giving the IP address to the ATEM. So what you need to do in this case is you need to unplug the Ethernet cable from the ATEM and the Mac and plug the Ethernet cable from the ATEM to the router. Then make sure if your ATEM doesn't get an IP address dynamically, you need to select an IP address using ATEM setup. Again, you go to the network settings and then you enter all the values that you see for the subnet mask and the gateway. And then your device should be on the network and you should be able to access it. So in the case of the ATEM Mini Extreme, I've set a static IP address, and the reason I've done a static IP address is I don't want the IP address to change while I'm at my house. I always want it to be 10.0.1.52. Because if I chose DHCP and I turned off my ATEM, chances are the next time I turn it on, it may get assigned a different IP address. So that in MixEffect, I'm trying to connect to my ATEM, and I'm like, what's happening? I can't connect to my ATEM Mini Extreme. That's because the IP address may have changed. And I would have seen that if I went to ATEM setup and looked at what the address is right here. But if I set it as a static IP and I assigned it to .52, then I'm assured, assuming that no other devices kind of grab that connection, that the ATEM is always going to be at 10.0.1.52. Another reason why you might not be able to connect to your ATEM using MixEffect is called controller contention. Most ATEM switchers can have up to 5 different controllers connected to it at any given time. So a controller could be ATEM software control running on your Mac or your PC, could be MixEffect, or could be Companion, or it could be another application that can control your ATEM switcher. And if you have more than 5, the 6th one won't be able to connect. And I've also seen instances where the switcher can't seem to let go of a connection that no longer exists. So you'll see that your ATEM is trying to connect, and you know I'm only running ATEM software control, Companion, and MixEffect. That's only 3. I should be able to connect. But in reality, the ATEM switcher has these phantom connections and it won't let go and reset to 0. So what you can do there is you can quit out of Companion, quit out of ATEM software control, and quit out of MixEffect and try reconnecting them one at a time. And chances are you'll probably be able to connect. Another thing to keep in mind is on some iOS devices or iPads, I've noticed that the Wi-Fi gets a little flaky over time and it requires a reset of the device. So on an iPad, you can press the volume up, volume down, and then hold the power switch, and then you'll see the slide to power off. You can turn off the iPad and then you'll restart it. And that usually kind of fixes the Wi-Fi problems that I've had on my iPad and allows me to connect to the ATEM switcher using MixEffect. So these are some tips on how to make sure MixEffect can connect to your ATEM switcher. I hope these tips prove useful in connecting MixEffect with your ATEM. If they don't, please leave a comment down below. I'm always looking for kind of these edge cases to figure out like what's causing these problems and trying to find solutions for them. I know that if we put our heads together, we can get it working, and that MixEffect will be showing up on your iPad and iOS fully connected to your ATEM. Hope this helps, and we'll see you in the next video tutorial. Bye-bye.